the light that stayed on. The first thing I noticed was the line of light beneath her bedroom door. The bulb in that room had burned out yesterday. I knew because I had removed the dead one myself, and I had not yet replaced it. The house felt different upstairs. It wasn't colder exactly, but the air seemed stiller. The smell of dust and old fabric was stronger near her room. The faint stale scent of curtains, blankets, and clothes that had been sitting undisturbed all day. I climbed the stairs slowly. The light beneath the door didn't brighten as I approached. It stayed the same narrow strip, warm and steady. I could hear the electrical hum now. Came from inside the room. That made me pause. The house was old, and electricity made all kinds of noises. The refrigerator hummed. The boiler vibrated. Sometimes the ceiling lights buzzed faintly when the weather was damp. But this was different. It sounded almost like a single sustained note. I stood with my hand hovering over the doorknob. "Hello!" My voice sounded embarrassingly small. No answer. I listened. There was a silence between the ordinary sounds of the house, and in that silence I heard something else. A breath, very faint, slow. I told myself it was the heating. I opened the door. The room was lit. Not brightly. The illumination was soft and yellow, enough to outline the bed, the desk, the wardrobe, and the curtains. The strange thing was that the ceiling bulb was dark. I stared directly at it. The bulb was exactly where I had left it, screwed into the socket, black and dead. The light was coming from somewhere else. At first I couldn't find the source. There was no lamp turned on. The desk lamp was unplugged. The curtains were closed. The window showed only darkness. Yet the entire room had that dim, warm glow. I stepped inside. The floor creaked beneath my foot. The light seemed to move. Not much. Just enough that the shadow of the wardrobe shifted across the carpet. I froze. Then the refrigerator downstairs clicked off. The hum inside the room continued. I looked at the dead bulb again. Nothing. I reached for the wall switch. The instant my fingers touched it, the light dimmed. I pulled my hand away. It brightened again. I didn't switch it. I just stood there. The room smelled strongly of dust and old fabric. I could smell the wool blanket folded at the foot of the bed, the dry wooden drawers, the faint perfume that had soaked into the curtains over the years. Then I noticed the shadows. They weren't pointing away from the light. They were pointing toward it. The chair beside the desk cast a long shadow across the floor, but its darkest edge angled toward the center of the room. The bed did the same. Even the folds in the curtains seemed to gather their darkness inward. I took one step backward. The floorboard complained. The light flickered. Once, twice. On the third flicker, I saw something reflected in the dark television screen. A bright shape behind me. I turned. There was nothing there. When I looked back at the television, the reflection was gone. I walked to the dresser and picked up the spare bulb. It was still in its cardboard box. I checked the ceiling fixture again. The bulb was cold. I touched the glass. Nothing. Then, very softly, I heard breathing. It wasn't coming from behind me. It was coming from the room. One slow inhale. A pause. One slow exhale. I stopped breathing myself. The house seemed to stop with me. No refrigerator. No pipes. No distant traffic. Nothing. Then the breathing happened again. Closer. I backed toward the door. The light grew brighter. I didn't mean the room appeared brighter. I mean the light itself seemed to lean toward me. The shadows stretched. The wardrobe's shadow reached across the carpet and stopped at my shoe. I couldn't move. The dead bulb overhead gave a tiny metallic tick. Then another, as if something inside the fixture were tapping against the glass. I looked up. For an instant, the bulb glowed. Not the filament. Something behind it. A pale, diffuse brightness filled the glass from within, and I saw a shape pass through the glow like a hand moving behind frosted paper. I stumbled backward. The bulb went dark. The room returned to its previous dimness. But now the light was stronger near the bed. I looked at the mattress. Nothing was sitting on it. Nothing was moving. Still, the blanket had changed. It had been folded neatly when I entered. Now the top corner had lifted slightly, settled, then lifted again. A breath. I stared at it. The blanket rose another fraction. Not enough to show what was underneath. Just enough to suggest that something beneath it was breathing. I left the room. I closed the door. For several seconds I stood in the hallway, staring at the thin line of light beneath it. It had changed. There was no longer a simple strip of yellow. The light was pulsing, very slowly, bright, dim, like a heartbeat. I stayed downstairs for nearly an hour. I tried watching television. I made tea. I checked the locks twice. I kept the kitchen light on because the darkness beyond the windows had begun to feel too deep. At 1:17, I heard a floorboard upstairs. One creak, then another. Slow footsteps. I turned off the television. The footsteps crossed the hallway. They stopped outside her bedroom. I waited. The line of light appeared beneath the door, then disappeared, then appeared again. Except now it was beneath the kitchen door. There was no kitchen door. I stared at the doorway leading into the hall. A thin yellow line lay across the floorboards at its threshold. The light wasn't coming from upstairs anymore. It was here. The hum returned. I could feel it through the soles of my feet. I didn't move. The hallway seemed longer than it had been a moment before. The stairs were still there, but the darkness at the top looked impossibly far away. Then I noticed something in the kitchen window. My reflection was standing in the glass. That was normal. What wasn't normal was the light behind it. It wasn't in the kitchen. It was in the reflection. A warm glow filled the reflected hallway, and in that reflected hallway, the bedroom door stood open. I watched my own reflection raise its head. I didn't sleep that night. The next evening, I stayed downstairs. At 11:43, the light appeared again beneath her bedroom door. I didn't go upstairs. At midnight, I heard the breathing. At 12:16, I heard the closet door open. At 12:19, the light appeared beneath the bathroom door. Then the study. Then the front door. It moved through the house without illuminating the rooms around it. Only the thin line beneath the closed door showed where it was. There was no light source, only the suggestion of one. Finally, at 2:03, I heard my sister's voice upstairs. "Are you awake?" I almost answered. Then I remembered she was still away. The voice came again. "Are you awake?" This time it came from behind the bedroom door. I sat on the bottom stair. The light beneath the door pulsed. Bright, dim, bright. And then I understood something I had been refusing to understand. The bulb hadn't burned out yesterday. It had been turned off. Something had been using it. Something that needed the bulb to be dark before it could make its own light. I didn't know how long I sat there. Eventually the light beneath the door stopped pulsing. It became steady, warm, patient. Then a shadow appeared on the other side. It was the shape of a person standing very close to the door. I could see the outline of a head, shoulders, arms. But there was one impossible detail. The shadow was facing the wrong way. It was facing me. I didn't move. The shadow lifted one hand, slowly, touched the door from the other side, and the light went out. For a moment the whole house was completely black. Then I heard a quiet click from the ceiling above me. I looked up. The dead bulb in the hallway had begun to glow. Not brightly, just enough to show me the ceiling. And beneath it, where my own shadow should have been, there was another one. It stretched across the floor toward the stairs. Toward me. I left the house before sunrise. I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. Last night, almost a year after I left, I woke up in my apartment at 2:03 in the morning. There was a warm line of light beneath my bedroom door. I lay still. My bedroom had no door leading to another room. It opened directly into the hallway. There was nowhere for that light to come from. I listened. Behind the door, something breathed. Once, slowly, then again. I reached for my phone. The screen lit my hands. In that small blue glow, I saw the bedroom light reflected in the dark window. The reflection showed my old house, her bedroom, the dead bulb, and someone standing beneath it. I couldn't see the face. I only saw the light around them. It was coming from their body, not shining on them, coming from inside them. And then the figure looked toward me. The light beneath my door went dark. The room fell silent. A second later, my phone screen went black. In the darkness, I heard a voice from the hallway. My own voice. It whispered very softly, "Thank you for leaving the light on." The bulb in my bedroom had burned out the day before. I had forgotten to replace it. The tune in the kitchen. The first time I heard the refrigerator humming the tune, I thought it was a coincidence. It was nearly 2 in the morning. The building had settled into nighttime silence. Pipes ticked inside the walls. An elevator cable groaned occasionally in the shaft. A car passed below, tires whispering over wet pavement. Then the refrigerator began to hum. At first it sounded ordinary. Refrigerators hum. Everyone knows that low mechanical vibration. But this hum had a rhythm. 3 low notes. A pause. 2 higher notes. Then 1 long note. I sat up. I knew that tune. I didn't know where I knew it from, and that bothered me more than it should have. The kitchen was dark except for the weak orange glow from the streetlights. The refrigerator stood against the far wall. Something moved in my memory. The smell of wet wool. A rough wooden banister beneath my palm. A yellow night light. I turned off the television. The apartment became very quiet. The refrigerator kept singing. I walked toward it. The tune became clearer. It wasn't coming from the motor. The motor made its normal vibration underneath it. The melody seemed to ride on top of that sound, as if something were using the refrigerator as an instrument. Then I remembered. My grandmother used to hum it. She called it a lullaby, although I never knew its name. I hadn't heard it since childhood. My grandmother had lived in a narrow house at the end of a dead-end street. Whenever thunderstorms came, she would sit beside my bed and hum that melody until I fell asleep. I remembered her voice. Slow, soft, almost monotonous. Then the refrigerator door moved. Only slightly. It gave a tiny click and opened half an inch. I stared at it. The motor stopped. Cold air spilled through the gap. The interior light illuminated the floor. I stepped backward. The door remained open. Then it gently closed. Click. I told myself the seal had failed. Old appliances did strange things. I went to bed. At 2:47, I woke up freezing. My window was closed. The heating was running. Yet the air felt like winter. I could see my breath. Then I heard the refrigerator. The same tune, only slower. 3 low. Pause. 2 high. 1 long. I got out of bed. The cold grew stronger as I approached the kitchen. The refrigerator stood closed. The interior light was on anyway. A thin white glow leaked around the seal. I stopped. The appliance was unplugged. I had unplugged it before going to bed. Now it hummed. I didn't touch it. The melody continued. And underneath it something breathed. A slow inhale. A long exhale. The refrigerator door opened. Cold air rolled across the floor. The shelves looked normal. Milk, mustard, leftovers. Then the light flickered. For an instant, the shelves were empty. The next moment they were full again. I blinked. There was condensation on the inside of the door. Someone had drawn 3 lines through it. Then 2. Then 1. I knew the pattern. My grandmother used to tap it against my forehead while humming. 3 fingers. 2. 1. She had done it when I was frightened. Her fingertips had always been cold. Then I remembered something else. There had been another child in that house. My cousin Daniel. He was 6 years older than me. We played together whenever I visited my grandmother. At least I thought we had. The memories were strangely incomplete. I remembered his blue sweater, his red plastic car, his voice calling from upstairs. But I couldn't remember his face. That frightened me more than the refrigerator. The humming stopped. A floorboard creaked behind me. I turned. Nothing. I looked at the refrigerator again. Its reflective surface showed the kitchen. Except the reflection was wrong. The hallway was longer. The walls were covered in my grandmother's wallpaper. My apartment walls were plain white. At the end of the reflected hallway stood a child. He wore a blue sweater. I couldn't see his face. The refrigerator began humming again. "Daniel," I whispered. The child raised his head. The reflection disappeared. I nearly fell. I called my mother. She answered on the fourth ring. I asked if she remembered the lullaby. There was a long silence. Then she asked why. I told her I had heard it. Finally she said, "You shouldn't know that tune." "Why?" "Your grandmother made it up." "No. She used to sing it to me." My mother breathed sharply. "She sang it to Daniel." I stopped. "Daniel." She began crying. She told me Daniel had died when I was 4. There had been an accident at my grandmother's house. I had been there. Daniel had disappeared during a thunderstorm. They found him hours later in the basement, trapped behind a fallen storage cabinet. My mother said she had never told me because I was too young. After the funeral, my grandmother stopped humming. I asked why I remembered Daniel as a child who had played with me. My mother said I had been confused. Then she said, "Your grandmother told me you kept saying Daniel was still upstairs." I looked toward the refrigerator. The interior light was on. "Mom, what did Grandma say?" My mother's voice dropped. "She said he wasn't upstairs." The refrigerator hummed. 3 low notes. 2 high, 1 long. Then my mother whispered. She said something had learned his voice. The call ended. I remained on the kitchen floor. Then the refrigerator door opened again. The interior was empty. Every shelf was bare. There was only a small yellow nightlight sitting on the bottom shelf. I recognized it immediately. It had belonged to my grandmother. I had seen it beside my bed as a child. I reached toward it. The humming stopped. A child's voice spoke from inside. "You're awake." I couldn't move. "Grandma said you would forget me." The light flickered. For a moment, the refrigerator door reflected a boy standing behind me. Blue sweater, dark hair, his face turned away. I didn't look behind me. The boy's reflection raised 1 hand, 3 fingers, then 2, then 1. The melody began again. Only now I understood why it had always sounded like breathing. It wasn't a lullaby. It was the rhythm my grandmother had used to teach Daniel to breathe slowly when he was frightened. She had made it for him, and when I was 4, she had used it to calm me while we searched the basement. I remembered everything. The fallen cabinet, the darkness, Daniel calling from below, and my grandmother telling me not to answer, because she had whispered that Daniel had already stopped breathing. Something else had been calling from the dark. Something that had learned his voice. The refrigerator door began to close. Before it shut, the yellow nightlight flickered. Then I heard my grandmother humming from inside it. The door clicked closed. The apartment became silent. I thought it was over. Then I heard a child's footsteps in the hallway. 1, 2, 3. They stopped outside my bedroom. A small voice whispered my name. I didn't answer. The footsteps moved away. Then the refrigerator started humming again. 3 low notes. A pause. 2 high, 1 long. And from inside the walls, another voice joined it. Mine. The voice I had at 4 years old. Humming along. I hadn't remembered that voice for 30 years. But the thing in the refrigerator had. And I finally understood why the tune had appeared after the appliance began failing. It wasn't the refrigerator that had started making the tune. The refrigerator had simply become cold enough, quiet enough, and dark enough to let me hear what had been waiting there. Something that had been waiting since Daniel disappeared. Something that had never needed him to survive. It had only needed someone to remember the song.